Hi, in this video we're going to be looking at a sample answer for part 2 of the IELTS speaking test. The topic card that we're going to be looking at is this one, to describe an event that made you happy. Now we did look at the planning stage for this task in last week's video. So if you haven't seen that, it might be worth going back to have a look at that video and how we planned our response. But in this video, I'm going to show you the full response to this task. And I will cover all 4 of the cues on the task card. So when and where it was, who was invited, what happened, and explain why it made you happy. We're going to go through all 4 of those cues and give a nice clear answer. Now, the answer I'll be giving here is the kind of answer a Band 9 level student would give. So after I've given the response, I want to show you and explain a bit about why it is this high level response, a response that would give a Band 9 score. So I will be giving a bit of an analysis of the vocabulary and grammar that we're using in this response. So let's get on with it and I'll show you the whole response from the beginning all the way to the end. Here we go. Recently, I went to my friend's birthday party and I really enjoyed the time I spent there. It was last Saturday evening and we met up at around 7 for a meal at a very nice Italian restaurant near to where I live. People finally started to head home at about 12. There were about 10 of us at the restaurant. My friend had invited some of his close friends and work colleagues. Most of them were people I've known since university. It was great to see some old faces, yet also a great chance to meet some new people. We all met at the restaurant and I gave the birthday boy a present and a birthday card. After that, we ordered some food, and when the food came, we ate and chatted together. Once we had finished all the food, the waiter brought out a cake and we sang happy birthday. Everyone went home quite late, but we all had a great time. It was brilliant to get together with old friends, and it was a good opportunity to catch up with what my friends had been up to. The occasion was a nice way to wind down after a hard week at work, and the food was delicious. After a fantastic meal, I went home feeling full and a little tipsy. So that's it, that's the whole response there. Now, of course, in the test, you're given between 1 to 2 minutes to give your response. So anywhere between 1 and 2 minutes is great. Usually my advice to students is to give a nice long 2 full minutes. So you just have to keep speaking until the examiner asks you to stop. Now, the response I gave here was somewhere in between 1 and 2 minutes, and I feel like I showed enough in this answer to get the highest possible band score, so I don't really need to speak any more than this. Now, you'll see I went through those 4 separate cues in the order of the task card, and this is generally my advice to students to what they should be doing in the test, just because it gives a nice structure to your response and makes it easier for the examiner to listen to and follow your response. Now, what I want to do now is just look at each of the kind of paragraphs I used for each of the cues in the task card, and maybe pick out a little bit of language that I used that showed quite a lot of skill in English. You'll notice that the whole response was generally using the past tenses, a mixture of maybe past simple and past perfect, and I'll point out some of the verb forms here in the response. But let's look at the response to that first cue. Now, you'll see here that, well, I'm using the past tense for the whole of this paragraph, but one nice little collocation that I made was, I really enjoyed the time I spent there. Nothing too high level here, but you'll notice that we're using the verb spend with time. We're also using the past form of that verb, spent, not spend. So that's one thing I used in that first part of my answer. There's also some nice idiomatic language here. Just towards the end of this small paragraph, I said people finally started to head home at about 12. Well, you'll see here I've used the word head as a verb. And in this context, it just means to go home. But it's some nice idiomatic language that native speakers would generally use. Maybe instead of saying started to go home, we said started to head home. So yeah, just a nice bit of idiomatic vocabulary there. Now, after I gave this short paragraph to answer the first cue, we moved to the second cue, and this was the paragraph that I used. Now, a couple of things to point out here maybe is that I said that most of them were people I've known since university. Now, nothing too complex here, but you'll notice the tense actually here is present perfect, right? I have known since university because I met them in the past and I still know them now. So it fits the context. Also, a nice thing that I've shown here with pronunciation is I've combined the words I and have together and said I've known. Now, this is something that native speakers will do, and sometimes non-native speakers have a bit of trouble doing things like this. But it's showing a feature of English pronunciation that they're really looking for you to do in the IELTS speaking test. Another little bit of vocabulary within this part that I've used is the words old faces. Now, it might be a bit confusing here that I'm describing the people as faces, but it's quite a common way to talk about people in English. And an old face, well, face just means a person that you know, but we're using the word face instead. Also, we're using the plural form of face and making sure it's clear, adding the S on the end and saying faces. It was great to see some old faces. That was one extra thing within that part of the response to that cue. Now, after that, we moved on to the next cue, and this was the paragraph that I used. Now, not too many things here. It's pretty simple. In general, this paragraph, again, is using the past tenses. There's one tiny bit of idiomatic vocabulary that some people might be a bit confused by, and that is the phrase birthday boy. Some of you might be thinking that, well, why are you calling him a boy? Obviously, he's a man. He's the same age as me. I've known him since university. But really, when we're saying birthday boy here, it's just an affectionate term to say to someone who you know and it's their birthday. Now, they're not a boy, they're a man, an adult, and we can just use it in this way. It's quite common to talk about this or say this when it's someone's birthday. A birthday boy or a birthday girl. Even though they're an adult, we can describe them in this way. And it's just quite a nice, affectionate way to talk about someone whose birthday it is. And it's very normal to do this for native speakers of English. That's it for that paragraph, but in the next paragraph that I use for the final cue, there's quite a lot of interesting vocabulary in this part, some of which you might have been confused by, but I feel like the context would help you to understand here. Now, I said in the first sentence here, it was brilliant to get together with old friends. Now, to get together, well, it just means to meet the people. But it's quite a common way to talk about a kind of occasion where you meet each other, to get together. So that's the first thing here that we're using. Now, in the next part of the same sentence, I said it was a good opportunity to catch up with what my friends had been up to. Now, a few things here. The phrasal verb, catch up with. Now, this just means to speak to a person about what they've done in the recent past, since you last saw them. They'll update you with the news about what they've been doing in their lives. So to catch up with someone, we've actually got two prepositions there, up and with the verb catch. It's got nothing to do with the literal meaning of catch. So some nice idiomatic vocabulary there. And then towards the end there, you saw I said had been up to. Well, tense here, I'm using past perfect, but also we've got the phrasal verb to be up to, which really just means to do something, right? What my friends had done in the recent past, to be up to something. So they're a very nice kind of idiomatic phrase that should be impressing the examiner, that you have a deep knowledge of how native speakers use the English language. We're not finished yet though. There's the next sentence where I use the phrase wind down. I said, the occasion was a nice way to wind down after a hard week at work. Now here, wind down means to relax, okay? After you've been very busy and maybe a bit stressed, to wind down is just to relax yourself. So we've got that phrase there, wind and down. Wind, not wind, remember. You can see there that it's spelled W-I-N-D, the same as the noun wind, but here wind is the verb, and we're using it as a phrasal verb here, to wind down, to relax. So that's another good bit of idiomatic vocabulary that I've used in this response. Now, the final thing is literally the last word, the final word of my response, where I used the word tipsy. I said, I went home feeling full and a little tipsy. Now, the word tipsy could be a word that you haven't seen before, but really it means a little bit drunk. So maybe I had a couple of alcoholic drinks, but not too many. You're not fully drunk, but you can feel the effects of a couple of alcoholic drinks. And we use the adjective tipsy to describe this feeling. And it's a very common word for native speakers to use to describe this feeling. So there we go. That's another maybe useful bit of vocabulary that you can take from my response and use in your own responses. Really, this is the idea. I want to show you a really good high-level response so you can take some of these ideas and vocabulary to give your own response and practice speaking for part 2 of the IELTS speaking test. But there we go. That's really it for this video. I hope it was useful to see a sample answer for part 2 and to kind of really understand why this kind of response is getting a very high score in the IELTS speaking test. If you did find the video useful, then don't forget to click the like button. And also, if you haven't already, remember to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss out on any similar videos on similar topics in the future. There we go. Thanks for watching and see you again in the next video.